The podcast opens with an introduction to Nick Fuentes, a controversial political figure known for his far-right views and online activism. Nick shares some of his early life experiences, describing his upbringing in a predominantly white suburban Chicago area that he fondly calls a land that time forgot. He emphasizes how the tranquil, uniform community of his youth, characterized by white picket fences, baseball culture, and Catholic values, has significantly changed due to demographic shifts and immigration. This transformation for Nick marks a loss of the America he knew and cherished, which becomes a central theme of his worldview. Nick also discusses his mixed ethnic background, Mexican, Irish, and Italian, and how he relates to his heritage. He contrasts his experience with the broader cultural changes occurring in American society. Despite his diverse ancestry, he identifies strongly with preserving the traditional, cultural, and racial identity of America as it had historically been shaped. This personal and cultural anchoring sets the tone for the episode's exploration of his political and social beliefs. Nick recounts the beginnings of his political interest, arising when he was just 12 years old, influenced by the political environment around the Obama presidency. He details his early intellectual journey through libertarian thought, citing figures such as Thomas Sowell and Milton Friedman, whose books and lectures he absorbed eagerly. Initially aligning with libertarianism, Nick explains his gradual shift towards nationalism under Donald Trump's candidacy, admiring Trump's media savvy and his stance on immigration. This pivot is linked explicitly to demographics and immigration policy, which Nick frames as existential challenges to the racial and cultural fabric of the United States. He recounts a moment in high school where he debated the presence of the Iranian flag in his classroom, illustrating his early inclination towards Zionism and pro-Israel sentiment, though this stance would later evolve. Throughout his high school and early college years at Boston University, Nick was politically vocal, engaging with contemporary right-wing intellectuals and activists, thus solidifying his ideological foundation. A major subject of discussion revolves around Nick's transition from libertarian individualism to a politics centered on collective, racial, and national identity. Through conversations with a diverse group of students and activists, including Assyrian Christians and Jewish intellectuals, he began to question the ideal of abstract individualism. He adopts a more identity-focused view of politics, emphasizing race, culture, and national heritage as key pillars. Nick expresses a strong desire to conserve the traditional white Christian America he grew up in and voices concerns about America becoming a majority-minority nation. He explains that his opposition to interracial marriage and preference for a white wife and children stem from deeply held values, an outlook he acknowledges has been met with controversy and accusations of racism. This candid admission reflects how his views clash sharply with contemporary progressive values, setting him apart from mainstream conservative figures. Nick candidly recounts his estrangement from established conservative figures and media, highlighting a falling out with companions such as Cassie Dillon and others affiliated with the Daily Wire. Initially, these individuals were friends and supporters, but political differences, particularly over Israel and immigration, drove a wedge. Nick's questioning of pro-Israel policies and criticism of influential figures like Ben Shapiro resulted in ostracization, even escalating to the point where allies blocked him on social media and distanced themselves professionally. He describes the experience as a form of blacklisting within the conservative movement, compounded by coordinated efforts he believes were aimed at undermining his platform. This included calls from associates and conservative media companies seeking to sever ties under pressure, further marginalizing him. These events fueled his perception of a dogmatic orthodoxy in conservative circles that punishes dissent, especially when it challenges deeply entrenched pro-Israel stances. The podcast delves into significant events that inflamed Nick's public profile and resulted in widespread condemnation. One pivotal episode involves a secretly recorded conversation at a conservative leadership institute, where he made disparaging remarks about interracial relationships, describing them as immoral. The covert nature of the recording and its subsequent dissemination on social media by allies of his opponents marked a turning point in his public reputation. Nick characterizes this incident as a politically motivated setup designed to destroy his career. He contrasts the harsh consequences he faced with what he sees as leniency for others within the conservative movement, emphasizing the selective nature of public outrage. The fallout from this clip led to his show being temporarily removed from the air by RSBN and contributed to his dismissal from the network altogether. Immigration policy and demographic change form a significant thematic strand throughout the conversation. Nick asserts that America's transformation due to mass immigration, especially since the 1990s, has diluted what he views as the country's traditional identity. He opposes large-scale immigration not on principle, but on volume, and the cultural implications of unrestrained diversity. He points to cities like Miami and New York as examples where immigration has altered the linguistic, cultural, and ethnic makeup to the point that they no longer feel quintessentially American. Nick acknowledges that intelligent and productive immigrants like the podcast host himself are valuable, but argues the sheer numbers overwhelm societal cohesion. This perspective underpins much of his nationalist rhetoric, advocating for securing the borders and conserving a particular American cultural essence. Nick's complex commentary on the Jewish community and Israel presents a nuanced but critical viewpoint. While recognizing the significant cultural, scientific, and political contributions of Jewish Americans and the historic cohesion of the Jewish diaspora, he expresses concern over what he perceives as dual loyalties and disproportionate influence on American politics and foreign policy. He probes the special bilateral relationship between the U.S. and Israel, questioning the allocation of aid and American involvement in Middle Eastern conflicts. Nick links the pro-Israel lobby's influence to broader geopolitical and domestic policy outcomes he sees as misaligned with American interests. Although opposing anti-Semitism, Nick differentiates criticism of Israel's policies and Jewish influence from racial or religious hatred, a distinction that has not shielded him from backlash. In the podcast, Nick reflects openly on his evolving relationships with Donald Trump and Charlie Kirk, two towering figures in the right-wing sphere. While supportive of Trump's early campaign and immigration policy stance, Nick provides a candid assessment, acknowledging that Trump's influence was pivotal in shaping his political evolution. Trump represents a fusion of nationalist and populist impulses that resonated with Nick's concerns. Regarding Charlie Kirk, Nick admits to their adversarial relationship and initial dislike, but also conveys a degree of respect for Kirk's work ethic and personal character. The recent assassination of Kirk profoundly impacted Nick, prompting reflections on mortality, political fervor, and the role of faith. He rejects calls to reduce political intensity following such tragedies, advocating instead for continued vigorous resistance tempered by love and respect. Media dynamics and the political use of private remarks figure heavily in the conversation. Nick describes the current media environment as one of hypervigilance and selective enforcement, where private conversations can be weaponized for public condemnation. He recounts how moments of candor or offhand remarks, particularly in hostile or private settings, are recorded and circulated to damage reputations and silence dissenting voices. He critiques not only opponents but also allies who have participated in this culture of cancellation, highlighting perceived double standards. Using his own experiences with media attacks, Nick articulates a broader critique of how political power is maintained today through media manipulation and social policing, which he believes stifles genuine debate and enforces conformity. Throughout the dialogue, Nick's communication style and use of humor are identified as both assets and liabilities. He is described as sarcastic, witty, and adept at engaging an often young and politically active crowd. His approach mixes sharp commentary with a trolling sensibility designed to provoke but also entertain and clarify his message. The podcast host acknowledges that while humor and irreverence are powerful tools, they come with risks, especially in the digital age where every word is scrutinized. Nick himself admits to moments of excess spurred by passion or anger, but maintains that his core message remains sincere. His public persona, frequently derided by critics, is presented by the host as a key part of what has enabled him to galvanize followers and remain relevant in modern culture wars. Toward the end of the episode, Nick discusses his long-term goals and the potential for political involvement, suggesting a possible run for office in the future. He situates his own trajectory within the broader evolution of American conservatism, identifying himself as part of a new generation engaged in redefining what it means to be right-wing in the post-Trump era.